At the end of Inside Out 2, it became clear that the emotions finally found a way to keep Riley's anxiety under control. But who is the most likely emotion to become the new villain in Riley's next adventure? Since Inside Out 3 is just a matter of time, and Disney is already working on the storyline for this historic sequel, so they certainly have a new villain in mind to take on this role in our protagonist's mind. But who could it be? Shame. Leading the race to be the new villain of Inside Out 3 is definitely the emotion that was all set to appear in Riley's second movie, but was cut at the last minute by the animation director, Kelsey Mann. Shame. The Pixar team justified that the emotion wouldn't have a chance to redeem itself throughout the film, since anxiety had to go through this process, being the villain and then regretting everything it did, as it actually happens at the end during Riley's panic attack. So, logically, and according to this argument, we can understand that the emotion, which would have a blend of green and blue colors, would probably play a prominent role in the movie, indicating that this can be well executed in Inside Out 3. Shame would be the emotion responsible for making Riley feel bad about herself, her appearance, and her hockey skills. For example, it would have the role of making the girl constantly self-deprecate, feeling inferior to everyone around her in some aspect. This would undoubtedly make Riley feel like a horrible human being most of the time, believing that nothing she did would be good enough to make the team or be accepted by a new group of people after her friends left. Much like anxiety did, but on an even more intense level. Thus, over time, Riley would start to feel like a useless person, completely incapable of doing anything, leaving our protagonist extremely depressed and sad. If we think about it, all this could still happen during high school, which the girl is now entering, probably seeing a slightly older Riley around 15 years old in Inside Out 3, a time when important decisions need to be made, and in this sense, shame would be the perfect emotion to be the new villain in the girl's mind. Gloom. Another strong candidate for the villain in the next Pixar movie about teenage minds is an emotion that was actually created to appear in the first movie but also ended up being cut. Gloom would be represented by a male emotion wearing an old-fashioned suit and tie in colors ranging between gray and brown. He would be tall and strong, somewhat like embarrassment, but his expression would be completely indifferent to everything and everyone, which perfectly fits a good villain. And if you also think the next enemy of the emotions in Inside Out 3 will be a new emotion, just like us, comment below with #villain. Although he didn't physically appear in the first movie, Gloom's presence was felt at the end of the film. But do you know when? If you thought it was the moment when the control panel starts to darken after the three emotions in the command center decide to make Riley run away from San Francisco to Minnesota, then you are correct. This was exactly the function of Gloom in action that would have happened if he had been in the first movie, but since the emotion ended up being cut, Pixar decided to keep his function even if it was implicit and hidden. It would be as if he could control, just like Ennui, the control panel from a distance. So even though he kind of appeared in the first movie, his actual emergence could really happen in Inside Out 3, where he would reveal that he has always been watching the emotions, and now he would complete what he tried but failed to do in the first movie. This would definitely be something I would love to see. Guilt. Another emotion that was cut from the second movie and could be the next villain in Riley's life sequel is guilt. Originally, the character would be represented by a small individual about the size of Anger who would have purple skin and no hair, thus becoming the first bald emotion, even outdoing Fear, who still has a small spiral hair. And the fact that he is bald would not be by chance, as he was initially quite hairy but would lose all his hair throughout the film due to his excessive worries that guilt brings upon him. In fact, the idea was that as the emotion began to become even more present in Riley's mind, she would develop the habit of twirling and pulling her own hair as a sign of nervousness, which is known as TTM, a disorder that makes a person feel the urge to pull out their body hair. Of course, the girl wouldn't go bald, but she would lose hair she pulled every time the emotion took action and she felt guilty. The idea of Pixar's creative team is that the character would always be carrying a heavy burden, which could be a backpack twice his size or even a ball and chain like those used by prisoners. This would serve to represent the fact that guilt is always feeling a great weight constantly, which is basically how Riley would feel with him at the control panel, which would make him one of the most negative emotions of all. Envy. And it could be that we already know the next villain in the third Inside Out movie. After all, the small, sweet, and evil Envy was responsible for some of Riley's most questionable actions throughout the new movie. For example, the green four-fingered emotion made the girl dye a strand of her hair red just to look like the girls on the Firehawks team, even though she wasn't part of the team. Additionally, she was the second most active emotion in the new film, second only to anxiety, and kind of served as her right hand in the orange emotion's plan to make Riley popular and have new friends in the next phase of her life. And even though she helped at the end of the movie, along with all the other emotions, that doesn't mean her ideas have changed. Because, despite the emotions finding a way to keep anxiety under control, nothing was done about little Envy, who, in my opinion, is potentially as dangerous or even more so than the orange emotion. After all, the feeling of envy is something terrible that has the ability to slowly eat away at anyone from the inside, especially if it's not kept in check. And clearly, the emotions are not watching Envy. On the contrary, she is free to plan her next moves, which we could very well see in Inside Out 3. If you really love cartoons, we have some incredible news for you! We've launched a new quiz channel. In it, we'll test our knowledge about our favorite cartoons and movies, like Bluey, Peppa Pig, and many others. It will be a journey full of challenges, laughter, and lots of fun with Wavy. Don't waste any time. Subscribe now at the link in the description or point your camera at the QR code on the screen and start playing. I'll see you there. Suspicion. The director of Inside Out 2 said his initial idea was to introduce 9 new emotions, intending to flood the control room so the old emotions wouldn't know what to do with so many new characters appearing and living there. One of the emotions that was warming up to appear in the second movie was suspicion, which could also be pessimism. She was one of the emotions created to appear in the second film and would be responsible for causing Riley to have a severe trust crisis against everyone she knows. Basically, Riley would believe that her friends Bree and Grace never liked her and always planned to abandon her because she wasn't a good friend. Similarly, at the hockey camp, suspicion would be the emotion causing Riley to behave selfishly, seeing all the girls as potential competitors who could be taking her spot on the team. For this reason, she wouldn't pass the puck to anyone and would try to do everything herself. Much like what happens in part of the last hockey game where we see her doing just that. This would be Suspicion's main role in the movie, but it ended up being partially assigned to anxiety as the emotion didn't appear in the film. But that doesn't mean she won't appear in the future, as over time, Riley will become a better player and consequently, more competitive. This would be the perfect environment for Suspicion to act as the new villain in Inside Out 3. Pride. And if Suspicion was scheduled to appear in the second film, Pride has been present since the first film, even appearing in one of Pixar's preliminary animations. The emotion would be male and look like an adult man with a yellowish color, similar to Joy, but he would wear a suit and have a mustache, in the style of an English lord. Pride's main function would be to make Riley arrogant and overly self-confident, believing she didn't need anything or anyone to be a better person, including her parents, friends, and teammates. Thus, she would be the best player on the team, but none of the other team members would have any sympathy for her, as she would constantly brag about her plays and goals. In fact, the character had a new design defined by Pixar, but it ended up not being used in the end. This leaves open the possibility of seeing this arrogant emotion appearing and being the villain of Inside Out 3 for sure. Now we just have to wait for Disney to confirm which of these emotions will be the next villain, or perhaps it could very well be more than one. While we wait for this next information, we'll keep watching cool videos like the 2 that are showing up on your screen now. Just choose and click on the one you prefer. Just a tip, the one on the right is really good.